welcome to today's video. This is on finding likelihoods. You should have your notes in front of you. You should have a pencil. If you look at the first page, it gives you some definitions. It says that suppose you toss a quarter in the air. There are two sides. It will only land on one side at a time. Each of these results is called an outcome. So some kind of experiment, tossing a coin, whatever happens, and there's some kind of an outcome, okay? Outcomes can be defined in different ways. If you look at the chart on the bottom, the outcome could be impossible, okay? You could have an outcome that is unlikely, one that is equally likely, meaning the outcome, for example, for a coin, it's equally likely that it could be heads or tails, okay? It could be likely or it could be certain. So you can kind of categorize outcomes in that way. So let's look at this example. This is example 1 on the following page. You have these different pie charts, and it asks for you to determine the likelihood that the spinner, if there was a spinner in the middle here spinning around, would land on the number 2. And you assume for this experiment that the spinner is only spun one time. So if you look at A, what is the likelihood that if I had a spinner here and I spun it, that it would land on the number 2? It's impossible, right? There are no 2's there. So this would be impossible, okay? The outcome of it landing on the number 2 is impossible. Let's look at B. Here I have 2 sections are 1 and 4 sections are 2. So if you look at your choices of impossible, unlikely, equally likely, likely, or certain, what would you say about B? I'd say it's probably likely, okay? There's more chances than not, because I have 4 sections that are 2 and only 2 that are 1, that it's likely, if I spun a spinner here, that it would land on the number 2. What about here for C? What is the likelihood that if I had a spinner and I spun it, it would land on the number 2? Pretty unlikely, right? I've got 5 sections that are labeled number 1 and only 1 section labeled number 2. What if I look at this chart here, this pie chart D? What is the likelihood if I had a spinner and spun it that I would land on the number 2? It's certain, right? That's the only choice that there is. It is certain that I would land on the number 2. And then finally here, I have half of the pie chart is filled with 1's and half of it is filled with 2's. So what descriptor can you use to describe the likelihood that if I had a spinner, it would land on the number 2? Well, here I would say it's equally likely, right? It's a 50-50 chance, right? Half the time it'll land on 1, half the time it'll land on 2. Okay, they have some more questions here to classify the likelihood of each event as impossible, unlikely, equally likely, likely, or certain. And I'd like for you to do those questions there, please. And then for the practice work, I would like for you to do all of the questions. Again, like our last lesson, they're pretty straightforward. You're going to be determining likely, unlikely, equally likely, okay? But these are all things that we need to know about so that we can study statistics. Thank you for your attention, and we will do more practice.